Welcome, Brick World family, to another episode of LEGO Fortnite. Last time, under LEGO Fortnite version 28.2, we built an airship that could be steered independently in all four directions. Unfortunately, there were a lot of physics errors with that build, and oftentimes the engines and the engine pods and the push bars would just fly off the build with no explanation. So we've revamped our airship, this time airship version 2.0, to be able to still carry a large amount of resources from one biome to another, but we've redesigned a single thruster pod in this case to move the ship forward, and stationary thrusters to turn the ship clockwise or counterclockwise depending on how we set it up. So without further ado, let's get into it. Now that we're into the game, let's take a look at an airship I've already built so we can get some idea of the functionality we're going for. This particular airship is built largely out of stone, though we're going to build our one today out of wood. Perhaps being a little lighter, it won't need quite as many balloons to take off, though who knows. Right now you can see that the basic functionality of the airship is I have these wings that have thrusters on one side over here and the opposite side on the other wing. This means that when I flip the switch for the turning function, the ship will turn clockwise and will turn relatively quickly since I have engines pointed in opposite directions, giving us a circular motion when we turn them on. I've got 7 chests in the center. You could potentially add even more. I have 6 down low and then 1 additional up here that I use to house what I like to call my flying supplies. So extra cord and silk and blast powder and wooden rods, so that if I need to replace a balloon or a thruster or a switch in flight, I can do it. You'll also see that I've moved away from having 3 independent thrust pods and 1 fixed thrust pod to having only a single dynamic thrust pod that is not attached to the rest of the ship to move forward. It's also attached to a dynamic base, and it has sort of these buffers built in to try to prevent some of the odd behavior we see when the objects run into each other. I'll tell you right now, just standing on top of the airship, I do occasionally hear the collision sounds as if something, even though I'm not moving, on this airship is running into something else. The current version of LEGO Fortnite, which was just released yesterday, is 28.30. They always claim additional physics fixes. Hard to know if anything was actually fixed. The other thing right now, because my ship is in landed mode, I've put these large piles of foundation, granite foundation, on each wing, and I like to call this my mooring block. I don't know if that's actually a technically correct term, but that's what I like to say. You'll also see that I put some front bumpers and a bed on the front of my ship, as well as a crafting bench that I can take with me anywhere. These front bumpers allow me, when I'm flying, since essentially my thrust pod will be pushing the ship this direction, to run into things without taking any damage to my airship. Similarly, when we land the airship, we want to have some sort of buffer on the bottom so that when we land, we don't ruin our landing pad or crush the bottom of the ship. So you'll see I have 4 large tires on the bottom of the ship, which act as a nice little buffer to make the ship land nicely. So now that we've seen what we're aiming to build, let's take a look at how to build it. You'll see here that this base is not my finished base. It's just sort of a work in progress right now. It's in a good location between the grasslands and the frostlands. But let's take a look at my bill of materials. Now, in order to build this airship, like I said, we're going to go wood heavy on this one, though you could certainly do stone if you're willing to put additional balloons on top of the airship to make it levitate. You'll see I have a lot of wood. This is probably more than we're going to need. And I want some stone as well, not only to build those mooring blocks, but also for a little something we're going to put in the center spine so that the main number of balloons that we have, I like to put them in the middle of the ship, just because, you could accidentally knock one of the sides of the ship off, and I don't want the entire center of the ship to immediately plummet to the ground and make a big mess. We're also going to carry some flexwood and some flexwood rods in order to build both dynamic bases if we need them, as well as tires. Then we have our balloon and thruster and switch materials here. This is probably overkill. I don't think I'm going to need 30 of any of these, but I'm carrying a little extra in case I need to add a couple extra balloons to even out the weight, or in case we have an emergency and something flies away on me that wasn't intended. Last but not least, on the very bottom here, we have got the materials I'm going to need to build grand chests around the center spine of the airship. I'm planning on putting 7 chests on, so I need 56 frost pine and 28 iron bars. So now that we know what we're building with, let's get to it. The first thing that we're going to do is build a staircase. Now this staircase here allows me to get started with the foundation of the airship. We're going to use just a typical big old wood foundation. It might also work to use a stone foundation here, but hopefully the wood is lighter so it takes less balloons to levitate. I'm going to use the snap build feature by holding down the right click button in order to allow me to attach the foundation right to the stairs here. The reason we're doing this is we're getting the stairs here in order to hold this piece off the ground so we can add our bottom bumpers to the ship from the start here. I'm going to put them right on the bottom corners on all 4 sides. Now that we have our bumper wheels on, we can start the rest of the build. The first thing I'm going to do is put on a couple of short walls in order to add a little bit of height to the bottom of our airship. The reason I do this is because our airship's going to end up being fairly wide when we're done with it, but I want to have as small a footprint for landing purposes as possible so I can land out in the wilderness if I so desire. So now that we've put a wall on each side, we're going to go back to our foundations, and I'm going to add a big base on top of this half wall that we're going to use to build the rest of the airship. I want to center it, so I have to move it back 8 and over 8 to get it where it needs to go. Again, using the snap to feature, I can more easily snap the foundations in the right location with just a single click. Now that we've got our base established, we're going to let this thing fall to the ground by breaking the stairs out. And now it's independent. It didn't even need a dynamic base, but now it's independent of the rest of the things that it's around, so we know that it'll be able to lift off quite easily. I'm going to add a second set of stairs a little farther away with a little mini stair on top so I can jump up on top of my airship while I'm working on it here. The next thing that we are going to build is a couple little extra bits of foundation to act as wings on the airship. This is sort of where our wings are going to be attached to the airship. We will put them on all 4 sides because we're going to build short extensions off this main base on every side of the airship. I usually mostly use these to line up other parts of the ship. I don't know if they're technically actually needed for stability or structural integrity, but like I said, they're very useful for lining up other things as well. So we'll throw on 4, 1 on each corner, or 1 on each side of our airship. And now we can get building the main body of the airship. So the first thing that I want to do is add the main feature of the airship, which is going to be the central spine that houses all of our chests for carrying material. I'm going with the shack wide floor 16 by 16 as my starter piece, and the main reason that I'm using this one is because it only uses 1 wood at a big size like this. Now that I have that on there, we're going to add our chests. We're going to line it right up in exactly the middle, and then I like to move it in 1 single stud from the edge. Now that I have 1 on, before I go any further, I'm going to build a central spine for this. The central spine is going to stand up in the center of the chest and give us a platform for adding balloons. So I'm going to grab the castle corbel corner, and I'm going to add a corbel corner. Now I know that's in the right location. Now we'll snap pieces to the other side, and we should be centered up. Excellent. Alright, now let's add our other chests. Like I said, I'm going to do 7 chests on this build. So I have 1 on the front there, I'm going to do 1 in the back, and I'm going to do 2 on each side for a total of 6 cargo chests that we're going to hold in the middle here. The 7th chest we're going to put up top to hold our supplies like we saw on the already built airship up on the landing pad here. So there we go. We've got our transportation section built, and now we can move on to the top platform where most of our balloons will be held. We want, when we line it up on a corner like this, we want to move it 4 in 2 directions. That should get us on the center. Okay, now we have to decide which side is going to be the front and which side is going to be the back. This is going to be, I've determined just now, for a number of reasons, we're going to put our grand chest to house our flying materials on this side, which means our rocket pod will be built back here behind me. So now that we have this part built, we are going to build some extra flooring in order to make the ship nice and wide, so that we can do lots of stuff on the ship. We can maneuver around it easily without falling off, which is important. And then we are going to get to work building the engine pods. Now, before I get too far into the engine pods, you will notice that I did build on the back of the airship, or the front of the airship, rather, this large extension. Not only am I going to need this large extension to counterbalance the weight from the thrust pod on the back, I'm also going to use this large extension, as we saw in the airship up top, as a spot to place a couple of bumpers, so that when we fly the ship forward, if we're tending to get in an area where we're going to hit something, it'll bounce right off. Notice I didn't get those perfectly lined up. One's a little lower than the other, but for this purpose, it should work just fine. Now that we have that on there, we're also going to have to add a little bit of extra space on the back that will allow us to build our thrust pod. It can be any number of sizes coming off the back here, but I'm going to go with the 16 by 16 piece again, since it's fairly inexpensive. Only costs 1 wood to build it, though because the dynamic base we're putting back here is actually wider than 16, we're going to have to add a couple of small little patches on the back here as well, so that our dynamic base doesn't slip off. I think all I really need are a couple of 4x8s, which I should be able to tack right on the back here. Again, trying to use the snap to feature to snap it on there. Really all I need to do is get it at the right height and then move it over with the arrow keys. We'll do that on each side. I suppose I can snap it all the way back to the back on this side, and then we'll do the same over here. So we'll snap to the side, get her lined up, and do that on both sides. Now when we add the thrust pod, we're going to need some way for the thrust pod to push our vehicle when it's ready to fly. So to do that, we're going to put in a foundation. Trying to line that foundation up right in the middle, which I think I did. And then we're going to add some fences on the sides so that our dynamic base doesn't slip off left or right. I actually built that one a little farther forward than I intended. So we will go ahead and break that one with the pickaxe. We're going to build our fence all the way to the back. I don't actually think that's needed, but we're going to get it all the way back there. The other thing that we're going to do quick is we are going to put a big old foundation up in the front here, just to add a little counterbalance while we begin working on the thrust pod. So as you saw on the finished airship, I put some small wheels, sort of as a bumper or a buffer, up on front in order to stop the airship from colliding and making too many gross noises as it flies around. It's inevitable, though, honestly, that you're going to get a lot of collision noises when operating an airship. Okay, the next thing that we need to do is build a temporary support piece. So now we've got our studs there, and we can begin working on the dynamic base. So we'll grab our dynamic base and we'll put it up on top of the post here. The main thing we have to do is make sure that our base is centered on the post. You can use the 4 brown studs and tiles in the middle to line it up nicely. As you saw there, as soon as I put down the dynamic base, the entire ship kind of sank in the back, which is why I knew I needed a little counterbalance while I was working on it here. Throw a little more counterbalance on there. Try to prevent it from flopping around everywhere. The other thing we're going to need while I'm building this thrust pod is something to prevent the thruster from falling off the back of the ship. And so we're going to add a little stop there in the middle. And now that we have that designed, we're going to add some tires. I don't know that these tires, strictly speaking, are actually necessary. They make it seem like the dynamic base is less likely to break from being jostled while you're flying around, but I don't know that that's actually the case. You'll see I have all my wheels in place now, and I'm out of small wheel materials. I no longer have the flexwood rods necessary to keep working. But I have all the ones that I wanted in, and so we'll move over to the next part, which is adding some thrusters. Got to be careful here that you don't hit the dynamic base when you break out the support. So make sure you line up your shot nicely, take a little extra time if needed. For some reason, the thrusters have vanished off this ship. I just put them on there. Why are they down here? Nobody knows. That's super odd. I don't think I put those down there, did I? I literally put those down there while I was working on this ship. Let's see what happens here. Next, we're going to add wings to the ship in order to allow us to steer left and right. So the first thing that we're going to need is another big 16 by 16 piece of floor. Not a wall, but a floor. And so we'll put one of these bad boys on each side, and then we'll build up a little stack of foundation on each side that we can attach thrusters to. So here we go. Got a stack on each side. And then we're going to determine now if we want our ship to turn clockwise or counterclockwise, because how our ship is going to turn is going to be, we're going to build up some thrusters on each side that are going to allow us to rapidly turn the ship either left or right. You'll see on this side I put the blocks facing towards the back of the ship. So on this side we'll put them facing towards the front of the ship. And this will allow us, when we flip our switch connected to the rest of the base, to either turn the airship clockwise or counterclockwise. Come down here and see if we can center up a couple of rocket boosters. Looks like I got 2 on there. Looks like I could probably get 3 on here if we really wanted to turn fast. Though turning fast might be a little dangerous if we end up going too fast. Now we're going to end up putting the rocket boosters on the other side. As mentioned, they are on the opposite corner, so they will be able to turn the ship quickly. Okay, we're only a couple moves away from being able to take this ship up into the sky. The next thing that we need to do is build a quick little cap to make sure that our thrust pod doesn't go flying out of the airship when it's moving. So again, we're going to grab some flooring. This time we're going to grab some long by 16 pieces, and we're going to put them up on top to prevent 2 things. Well, to prevent both the ship from flying away. Hey, look, our engines reappeared. That's sure fun. As well as giving us a little gangplank to walk down when the ship is in motion. Okay, next thing that we're going to do is add our switches. So we can add switch number 1 for going forward, and a little bit farther away we're going to add switch number 2 to control our rotation. Now that we have the switches on, we are ready to try to take flight. So we're going to add balloons. I always like to add the balloons to opposite corners, one at a time, until I know we are working on or achieving lift. So we've got 2 on, got 3 on, we still haven't taken off. I do have these little mooring blocks here, as well as the stairs, which might be getting in the way. So we're going to break our stairs off. We'll break the front mooring that we put on here in order to try to balance the thing. And we're still not quite ready to take off, so now we'll add a couple balloons to our thruster pod. So we got a little bit of lift there. We'll add the second one on the other side. And there we are. We're slightly off the ground. We'll toss them on the corners of the actual airship. This last one should get us nicely off the ground. There we go. Now the one thing that I will note is that because we have the thruster pod on the back of the ship, it's considerably heavier than the front. We could add some more weight to the front to try to balance it out, but I'm just going to add some little balloons up front here. That should help lift up the back so that we have either a slight pitch forward or at least a nice even pitch so that we can see out the front of the airship when we're trying to fly. Okay, looks like we're nice and high now, but our thrusters are missing on the back. So that's going to make steering quite the challenge. In fact, when I hit them here, even though they, as you can see, they're stuck to the bottom of the airship, we're actually traveling in the right direction, just like they were actually on the back where they're supposed to be. But here we go. We can see how fast we can turn with our 6 thrusters. In fact, we're turning so fast there, I think it's way too fast. But we can turn in a full circle there with one single press of the button, which makes turning and maneuvering the ship pretty spectacular. So there it was, Airship 2.0. There are still a lot of warts to work out in LEGO Fortnite. They keep making it better, including the recent update, Gone Fishing, where you can actually add not only a compass, which was definitely needed, but a fishing pole that allows you to do all kinds of new and interesting things, like fish for extra resources and extra food. Lots of cool ideas still coming out of Fortnite, and every time they release a new update, they report that they're improving the physics. It's still not perfect, but that airship has worked well for me. I've transported massive amounts of copper between the biomes, as well as harvested a good amount of bright core to make sure that I can continue to get the resources I need to build crazy and complex castles. Speaking of crazy and complex castles, next time we'll take a look at my main base, which is in the desert, called Rocktop Castle. It is once again reached the high complexity and very high complexity build arena, so I can't add more to it at this time, but we can take a tour to see how I've got it set up and where I'm going from there. Until next time, I'll catch you at Brick World.